We are here. This is One Hood Powers Forum for County Controller here in Allegheny County. This serves as our Power Hour program for the week. My name is Ross Tedder. I am the Civic Engagement Coordinator here at One Hood Power.
Hi, my name is Diana Lewis. I'm also employed at One Hood Power.
Yeah, so we're super excited to be here. We have a crowd here today with us, so thank you so much for the folks who came out today. We can give you a round of applause. Woo! There we go. For those of you who didn't have the opportunity to make it here with us today, we're live streaming this on our Facebook page and our YouTube. So if you're tuning in, thank you. We have a good program today. We're super excited. Nate and I here are going to be the moderators. We have two great candidates for this position right here today. We have Cory and Darwin Leuba. We're just going to be here. I'm going to pass things off to Nate. But thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. This will be for about an hour, and it's an opportunity for us to hear directly from the candidates for county control.
County control is a position that has a huge role in terms of just the financial well-being of the county. They oversee a lot of money that comes in and out. So this is a really important position. It affects a lot of people in a lot of different ways. So this forum is going to pose questions to each candidate in an alphabetical order. Candidates will have 2 minutes each to answer the question and 30 seconds to respond to each question directly proposed by the candidate. So if Darwin will put the question to Cory, he gets to respond and vice versa.
At the end, we'll also have a moment for any questions. We do ask that you limit your questions to the candidates by a maximum of 30 seconds due to time capacity. We will begin by asking the questions to introduce ourselves and talk about why they were in the position.
So without further ado, we want to introduce our two candidates here. We said Cory and Darwin Leuba, and I will let each of them talk a little bit more about themselves in their introduction. Let's start with Cory. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm the county controller. I've been in this position for 8 months. I spent 11 years on the city council where we took on some very difficult fights. We passed pay for everybody in the city and now in the county. We fought in the court fighting the nonprofit because we all know that they are not a nonprofit. And we also fought gun control. We put out common sense gun laws for gun reform in the city, but we took it all the way to the state as well. In my 8 months as county controller, we have taken the office off of Branch Street into your neighborhood. The county controller needs to be out in the streets learning what the issues are because we have a $1.3 billion budget in the county, and we need to make sure those funds are being spent appropriately. So I just want to thank everybody for having us today, and I'm a little under the weather, but I'll try to get through it. Thanks.
Thank you, Cory. Thank you for being here. Darwin?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. My name is Darwin Leuba. I'm currently the elected auditor of O'Hara Township, where I have served for over half a decade. I'm also a union member at Teamster, and I graduated from Fox Chapel before earning a bachelor's in computer science at Yale University. I'm running because for half a decade, I've been working on some of the greatest problems facing Allegheny County. Corporate power, racial inequities, dirty air, dangerous jail, and a government that is focused more on looking good than doing good. And time again, that resistance to accepting responsibility and belonging means that change doesn't happen. The same inequities that led to Pittsburgh being the worst city in America for Black women have now been transferred into the controller's office. In the controller's office, Black employees make an average of 76% of what white employees make. And that's worse than it was a year ago when it was 83%. In fact, while the racial salary gap across the rest of county government has decreased by 1.5% over the past year, it has increased in the county controller's office, where salaries for white employees on average have jumped over 7.5%, yet the salaries for Black employees have decreased by 1.3%. To put this into an annual number, the average for white employees is $65,136. For Black employees, it's $49,763. For Black men, it's $58,849, and for Black women, it's $46,735, which means that Black women make $18,402 less than white employees on average. So I hope we talk today about using the controller's office to combat inequity, but we can talk about it all we want. But when the disparities in the controller's office have gotten worse, and when the person in charge takes money from corporate PACs and UPMC leadership and Highmark PAC and utility companies, we can't trust those audits to center our needs.
Thank you. Thank you both for your introductions. Let's get started. First to you, Darwin, and then Cory. Could you please let us know why you are running for controller of Allegheny County?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I just talked about, I've been working on all these different issues, whether it's, jail oversight or air policy or tackling nonprofits. And time again, whether it's the right to know law requests I've done to try to increase transparency in government, or even just, basic, simple good government actions, it seems that the stalling has been at the county level. So I've been the auditor over here at Township for half a decade. But at the municipal level, I don't have the statutory authority to force county agencies to provide information. I have to use the right to know law and other processes that allow the government to delay until things are at a point. For example, the Amazon HQ2 bid, where we won in court again and again, but then it wasn't until after the bid was awarded somewhere else that they finally released this information. And when we look at jail contract information, that's something where I've won over a dozen right to know law cases against the current controller's office because they just kept delaying the release of this information. And if we want to have action on the issues facing our county, if we really want to take on UPMC, if we really want to reduce inequities, that stuff has to start today, and there has to be a sense of urgency. And I don't see that sense of urgency in the controller's office today. The UPMC audit could be expanded countywide today if we really wanted to. We could enforce jail contracts today and improve healthcare and nutrition if we wanted to. And we absolutely need to because the current food service contract expires, I believe, at the end of April. So there's a time crunch on all this. People are dying in our jail, and until we have somebody who is scrappy and understands the urgency to these issues, we're still going to see these adverse effects countywide.
Thank you.
So why I'm running? Besides my years on city council passing affordable housing trust funds, understanding inequity all across the city of Pittsburgh, what I've done so far as controller, I've done 2 surprise inspections in the jail. We've done 2 audits in the jail. You know what those 2 audits mean? Those are the most audits done in the last 7 years. I've done them in 7 months. 1 audit was on staffing, which we know is low. When the morale is low, the warden's got to go. And that's what our stance has always been. When you look at the staffing issue, we are going to find out if somebody broke a contract with the county jail. The other audit that just came out today was on DHS. A lot of the times we only focus on people in the jail. What happens to their kids? Last year, 12,000 of our kids in this region were affected by a parent, guardian, or caregiver that spent 1 night in jail. And we do not support them until after 8 weeks. That's almost 2 months of supporting those kids. That has got to change. Our office pointed that out. Nobody else did. When you want to talk about equity in our office, yes, we have to do a better job. I've been there 7 months. We've already raised the minimum wage in our office, and we also have had people that retire, and we're promoting from within, raising our wages for staffers that deserve a raise, management that deserves a raise. And we've also reached out. We've held neighborhood meetings as well as online meetings to recruit more and more talent into our office. So we are very aggressive in bringing in the right people to this office and make it way more diverse than it already is when I took over. Thank you.
Thank you, Cory. So this next question, you both kind of touched a little bit upon this in your intros and in this last question. But what experience in terms of financial administration do you have that will guide you in this position? And specifically, what has that experience taught you that you think is important for this position? Starting with Cory.
Okay. Yeah. So experience, 11 years Pittsburgh City Council, balanced the budget every single year, fought to get Pittsburgh out of Act 47. This is more than an auditor's job. I'm not the one. If you want somebody to sit behind a desk and push numbers all day, don't vote for me. Because the reason is you're not going to understand what's happening in the region if you sit behind a desk every day. You want somebody that understands, knows what to do, knows how to get things done. That's why I'm qualified for this job. We brought in so far experts from PNC to work in our office. We brought in the former council budget director in the city of Pittsburgh for over 20 years to help oversee our budget. And we also do more than accounting. We do the payroll for everyone in the county. We do accounting work, and we also do, obviously, audits. But we also do inspections. What do I mean by that? We go on site and inspect whether people are being paid a prevailing wage on county jobs. We make sure that those jobs are built properly. That hits home to me because my district on city council had the Front Hall Bridge collapse. So I take that very, very seriously. So if you want somebody that's going to understand what's going on in our city and in our region and get money to the proper organizations that are going to help people and audit the ones that are not doing their job, that's why I should be the controller for another 4 years.
Darwin?
Yeah, I think it's all well and good to talk about, I think Cory uses this line, I've taken the office off of Grant Street and into the community, but you also can't neglect the inequities within the office yourself. And I don't think it's possible to trust a controller who's talking about equity if they're not going to have equity within the office themselves. And I wonder if the statistics that I read about how the office has gotten worse over the past several months on financial salaries and racial equity is news, or if that's something that you've ever analyzed. But to talk about my financial experience, to answer your question, in the private sector, I've worked with tens of millions of dollars in budget that gets spent very quickly. And I've served as O'Hara Township's elected auditor for over half a decade. And when I manage political campaigns, I have to directly decide the most efficient way to spend that money. And I've done this pretty well to elect underfunded challengers against well-funded incumbents, including electing Leslie Howland, who is one of probably the only fierce advocate on the Jail Oversight Board. But I think the more helpful experience I bring is my technical background, actually, in computer science. I have a degree from Yale in computer science. And that's what enabled me to very quickly audit UPMC parking lots. And that ability to navigate databases and large data sets quickly and efficiently is critical to audits that get to the core of the problem without wasting our time. And it's one thing to vote on a municipal budget, but it's an entirely different thing to inspect contracts and audit departments and to get into the technical details, which is what the controller's office really needs to do.
Cory, would you like to respond?
Yes, an audit when you're sitting at home is not peer reviewed. Our auditors who have been there, some of them for over 30 plus years, are peer reviewed from outside federal and state agencies. So we take our auditing very seriously. The UPMC argument, I was the only elected official at Mayor Gainey's press conference when he said he wants to audit not just one, but all nonprofits. Because if you only audit one, they're going to be selective and take you to court. You have to audit all the nonprofits, which is what the mayor's doing. It's a great idea. It's going to take time, which is why you have to stand up and fight UPMC, which we did on city council. The other way to fight them and all of these corporate entities is to have fair labor union elections. UPMC will not allow their workers a fair union election. I stood with SEIU, supported by SEIU, in all of those fights, because if you get a union at UPMC, you now have a seat at the table with the people's voice in it. And that's really a great way to start fighting back UPMC and other corporations like that.
I don't want to see you itching over there. I think responses are only allotted whenever a candidate is mentioned, or yes, they're mentioned directly. So we move on to the next question. Nate.
All right. Sorry. How do you think the Office of the County Controller can work to ensure money is equitably spent to address issues of concern such as affordable housing and public safety?
Darwin, sorry.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think that it is core to the oversight responsibilities that it does. And that's why I keep going back to inequities within the office, because if your office isn't equitable, then you won't be able to equitably look at audits. And we have to understand that different auditors are going to come from different backgrounds, and that's going to give different perspectives. And so I think when you've had white leadership in an office for so long, that's caused a lot of these issues where a lot of the auditing has maybe centered on issues that only impact white folks and that don't consider Asian folks or Black folks. So when we look at spending, I think one of the largest problems is how we work contracts, right? And I know that people have tried to split up contracts in the past, or there have been different issues where white companies have tried to find a person of color to kind of create a front to get contracts that are awarded specifically for minority-owned, women-owned businesses. So I think that's something that we need to be very diligent on, but in order for that to be a priority, then we need to make sure that the office is representative and that the auditors are representative of our region, because that's the only way we can make sure that they're going to prioritize equity and how money is being spent.
So when it comes to equity, if you step into an office and you've raised the minimum wage and you're out recruiting people, that is a good step towards changing the balance of where that office was and how many political figures they've hired over the last 2 decades, where then I came in and made that change. You also have to talk about issues. The first 2 audits, one was on a TIF in Leuba. That is tax increment finance money that we are auditing to make sure people are paid a prevailing wage, but that it's also spread out equally around the county. We have seen a lot of suburban areas that are wealthy that are getting those funds. We do not agree with that at all. Our office already put out recommendations about that, how we can spread that wealth around the county. And I've seen it because I represented the city of Pittsburgh. And I see where areas are getting funding, and it's not for affordable housing, it's not for good paying jobs. That's a huge issue that I took on. Again, when you're talking about what we're gonna do in the office, we put out an environmental plan. The health and environment in our county is terrible. Our air quality is terrible. The Clean Air Fund has never once been audited. We have that in our plan. As well as when you're looking at, and I mentioned it before, people that are incarcerees, what happens to their kids? That is something that is not talked about. We are not talking about supporting those organizations. DHS is going to be audited by me already once. It's already scheduled for another audit on homelessness and housing. If we are giving them blank checks to do their job, that's not correct. We need to make sure that that money is being spent, and they have to show us what they're spending that money on and that it's helping people. Because for too long in this county, we've been giving money to the same organizations that are not proving that they are doing a good job at all to spread out equity amongst everyone in this county.
Thank you. So next question, as county controller, you are entitled to a seat on the jail oversight board. Cory, you mentioned a little bit about this in your intro, just about the warden. But what is your position concerning the Allegheny County Jail? And what specifically would you try to accomplish through that position on the board, starting with Cory?
Yes, so as I've been on the board, I've done 2 surprise inspections. As I mentioned, the 2 audits that we've already done. That jail has a $100 million budget. We have already put out, in every meeting we have talked about the quality of food and why they need to have higher standards in the RFP that is out there. We are hiring a liaison that's going to be our eyes and ears for the jail oversight board. That liaison is about to sign a memorandum of understanding because they don't work for the jail. They work for us. We need to be more transparent. At every board meeting, we ask for things to be presented, posted on our website, because the controller technically is the secretary of that board. So we have taken the fight publicly, but we also have to go even further. Besides changes at the board, or besides changes at the jail, we have to look into where we're spending that money. We have to pay incarcerees. I mean, that is a bill that Councilwoman Hallam was just in my office an hour ago talking about, paying individuals for the work that they do there. And you know what? That would be something that would be historic. A liaison will be a historic position because we've never had one. Only one other county, I don't even know, in the state has something like that. There have to be more eyes and ears on that jail, and it can't just be the board. It has to be individuals that we can send down there to help us through that process. But it is a long time, it's way overdue. Their budget is extreme, and as I said, the changes have to come from the top all the way down, because we are paying an extraordinary amount of overtime to our employees there as well. And if somebody breaks contracts when it comes to Summit and other food organizations, we're going to find that out because we're already doing a staffing audit that will prove that. So we were very aggressive once I got on that board to what we were going to bring out and how transparent we were going to be.
Thank you. Darwin?
Yeah, so it's all well and good to identify the problems that I've been talking about for many years and that Councilwoman Hallam has been talking about for many years. But we're forgetting that the controller's office, Cory's office, has the statutory authority to enforce contracts today if we wanted to. And when we talk about the Summit contract, it was back in January when I was telling him and the board that they needed to enforce that contract and that they had the statutory authority to do that. I explained the statutory mechanism on my website. And there's an urgency to enforcing that contract because there's only 2 months left. And once you pay them money, it's going to be a lot harder to get that money back. And we had the same problem with the previous contractor, Trinity. So because I've been working on jail issues for many years, I know historically how things work. And what happens is they say, oh, we're going to have this new RFP, we're going to have this new vendor, but then the new vendor fails. And they say, okay, we're going to get another vendor. But time and time again, if you don't enforce the contract in the moment, it's not going to happen. The other piece of it is in healthcare. And so AHN is the healthcare provider, and we know they're not providing healthcare to the standard that is necessary. And actually, it's interesting because a while back, I tried to get the billboard right outside of the jail that you can see on 376 to talk about the inequities and talk about the lack of healthcare and nutrition in the jail. But AHN actually has a long-term lease on that billboard right outside of the jail. And we know that they've sent doctors who don't have proper licensing or have lied about their licensing in the past. So we know what the problem is. And if Cory wanted to today, he could enforce both of those contracts. He could withhold funding until they're in compliance. He could look at the records that we already have in hand for folks who are entering and exiting the jail to see when they are or are not sending staff, and start withholding money to start increasing healthcare and nutrition in the jail currently. And I think in Allegheny County, we've used reports and delays and experts, and it's particularly the administration that does this. But I'm seeing this now where, we said we're going to wait until things happen, until an audit's done and the report is done, when a lot of the information we've already had readily available, and what we need is action on it in order to improve the quality of life and in order to reduce the human rights violations in the jail.
Understood. Thank you, Darwin. Cory, you were mentioned directly, so I think you can respond.
Yes, I mean, being aggressive on contracts is one thing. You can't always break a contract or else you get sued and cost county tax dollars. But yes, we inspect every jail contract that comes through. And since I got in, we have not just blankly signed them. We go through each and every contract. The ones that we're discussing today have been there for a number of years. Some it was supposed to be gone in December. So we have pushed for a change in the commissary. We have a new contract at the commissary, and the food services is going to be new in the next couple of months. But everything that we're talking about, we are in the process of doing that full audit, so that if somebody, not just Summit Food, but anybody else that does contract work with the jail is doing something wrong, we're going to find that out, hold them accountable, and get our money back. We do not have to wait, or it's not that we're waiting. We were very aggressive when I got there to do those audits because I understood that there was a problem with staffing at the jail, and that's why we're fighting those contracts as well as the staffing issue.
Follow-up question for both of you. So do you commit to ensuring that jail contracts are open to the public when that's permitted by law? Starting with Darwin.
Yes.
Yes, we do that right now. We have transparency. We have a dashboard that puts those contracts out as soon as they're completed.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. Much of the duties of the controller come through the powers given by the state legislature. What, if any issue areas do you believe you would advocate for at the state level to make your job more impactful? Darwin.
Yeah, so at the state level where we want changes, particularly I think is when it comes to the authorities. So I know the previous controller, Chelsea Wagner, went to court to try to audit the various authorities, and the court ruled that the Attorney General actually had the auditing authority over most of them, and I believe the Auditor General has authority over the Port Authority now, Pittsburgh Regional Transit. So I think that is the most confusing part of the way that the statutory authority is provided out, because one, the Attorney General's office doesn't really do audits, and I was talking to Eugene DePasquale about this the other day, our former Auditor General, and we were talking about how sometimes the Attorney General would transfer that statutory authority over to the Auditor General, but really, the people who are most impacted and people who understand the issues best are going to be at the county level. So I would advocate not necessarily a legislative change, but perhaps working with the state level officials to transfer that authority down to local auditors.
Yes, I would agree. That is one. I mean, I would love to do those audits because they impact, especially when you're talking about PRT, how much they impact our region. But the other thing that I've already talked to state senators about is my seat on the jail oversight board, giving us more teeth and the ability to pass legislation at that board that can actually impact the daily lives of residents in the jail. Right now, it's very frustrating sitting on that board when we pass motions, when we call for things to happen and they don't happen. It's because of the statutory authority that was given to us by the state. So if we want to start changing the way we look at helping residents at the jail, it's got to start at the state level to change my power with a seat on that board to make those impact changes on each and every day that those residents are down.
Thank you.
Thanks. So this is a fairly straightforward question, and obviously one that you know the answer to. But for our audience, what role, in your view, does the county controller have in just making sure that the county isn't misspending and misappropriating funds, and what, in your view, counts as like misappropriating, right? And how will you carry out this duty, if you're elected? Starting with Cory, since you went last time.
Yes, so obviously we have a $1.3 billion budget. So we get to see where that money is spent, which is why we have accountants in the office seeing where those dollars are going, where those contracts go. Somebody breaks a contract, we will not pay that. So what we can also do is fight for, on those contracting sites, that there are minority women-owned businesses, that we are following the letter of the law at the county, that they are following what those guidelines specifically are. So what we have already been able to do is the audits that we've done on TIFs, LERTAs, DHS, the jail, and then another one on Visit Pittsburgh, which gets millions of dollars of county tax money. And are they spending it appropriately? Right now, we found out that they spend $600,000 a year alone on rent. That is not appropriate. We've also seen that their funding is private and public mixed together. If you're getting our dollars, you better show us where that money's going. So for us to be aggressive in these audits and actually find out money that can be spent more appropriately in our communities, that's what the controller's office needs to do.
Thank you, Darwin.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of places we can go with this, and it's not just money that's spent, it's also money that's not being spent or ordinances that aren't being enforced. But I want to start with the Clean Air Fund, because that's something where, when polluters pollute, they put money to the Clean Air Fund, and that theoretically is supposed to go back into the impacted communities. But we saw, I think it was 2018, when the administration tried to raid the Clean Air Fund to, upgrade a health department building, renovate it in Lawrenceville, which is not where most of the pollution is happening. When we think about pollution, specifically the thing that comes to mind is Clairton Coke Works and Clairton and Jefferson Hills and those surrounding communities that, just at a Jefferson Hills Democratic committee meeting last night, and they were talking about how bad the air was recently. So I think that's one of the main things, is looking at the Clean Air Fund. And from the start of my campaign, I was calling for an audit of the Clean Air Fund. So I'm glad that it's been adopted in the controller's platform, but that's something that isn't super complicated and could really happen a lot more quickly than I think a lot of the audits have been. And being an auditor and doing different types of auditing and having a technical background, I think I could help make a lot of these processes a lot more efficient, because as we know, local and county governments don't necessarily have folks with the technological background to make things quicker. The other piece of it is where money is being spent specifically in terms of parcel review, which is the basis for that UPMC audit. That's something where, by a county ordinance that was passed in 2007, we're supposed to be reviewing all of the treated public charity parcels every 3 years, and we never completed a single review. And that's something that could happen in the controller's office today, where we would do that review and we would use the statutory authority and frame it as an audit of assessments as the rationale for doing that review, so that we can get UPMC parking lots, HM parking lots, other parcels, all of them back on the tax rolls. And I do agree we need to look at all of the major nonprofits so that it's equal across the board. But I'm just one auditor, and that's why I'm running for this position, so that I can have a whole team looking at these properties. And I think a large part of the reason we have it is because UPMC leadership has spent so much money in political campaign contributions in this race in particular. And I think that's why these things will take too long or are too complex or can't happen right now. And I think we can't trust those arguments when UPMC leadership has spent so much money.
30 seconds to respond, Cory.
Yes, we never said anything would take that long. In fact, he actually mentioned the same answer. The assessments of those properties do not come from the controller's office. So, the county executive needs to do that. When you talk about the Clean Air Fund, we put out our environmental plan way before any of this election even began. We want to audit the Clean Air Fund, as I mentioned. We actually do need to do more internal audits of what we have. We have 800 vehicles in the county, only 15 are electrified. So by us calling ourselves out, that's how you make progress, and that's how you move the county forward. And fighting UPMC is something I've done since day one when I was on city council. So I have no problem taking those fights on head on against anyone.
Do you have a response to Darwin's comment about UPMC's contributions to this race?
No, I mean, I think it's money that's not well spent, if you think about it, because I've never stood down to anybody that's donated to me. For me, I have put money back into other campaigns, back into elections that matter, supporting good candidates across the board. And I've taken whatever donations I give to what organizations and good, clean government PACs that I want to support. And there's a number of them that I'm listed on with a lot of progressive candidates that I've already donated back to.
Thank you.
All right, this one's more of a general question that we've already kind of covered, but still to ask, what is one thing you would like to change as controller in Black?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I think it really starts in the office. I think we need a $20 an hour minimum wage as a baseline, and I think if you do that, you will reduce a lot of the racial disparities that are in the office today. So it won't eliminate them completely. It'll bring them in line with the rest of the county and help prevent that. But that's one of the easiest, simple things you could do right now to at least make it so that Black employees aren't making less than they were a year ago. And then from there, I think you need to look at the rest of the longer term hiring practices. And I think being Taiwanese American is very different than being Black, and the racism I experience is very different than the racism that Black people face. But I've been called a chink, and I've experienced racism in different ways. And because of that, racism or DEI work in the office is not an afterthought or something that I want to simply farm out to a consultant. It's part of everything that I do. And I think I'll talk about my family for a moment. So my grandmother and Fred Scott King were roommates at Antioch. And after graduating, my grandmother became a social worker. And my grandfather was an engineering professor. And I think I pulled from both of their values because while I have a strong technical background in computer science, I've been applying it as best as I can to try to do good. And that's why when I interviewed Bethany Howland for a job in 2018, after she told me her story with incarceration and addiction, I recruited her to run for county council and managed her campaign pro bono because I knew that in order to fix the human rights violations in the jail, we needed somebody closer to the problem who could stand up to the administration and say, I know you're lying about this issue because I was in the jail and I saw it with my own eyes. And that's how I will operate as county controller. And I hope to, bring that into the office so that we can actually address the issues instead of just talking about them as we've done for so many years in local government.
So when you talk about wages, we raised the minimum wage when I got into that office to $18 an hour. You can't just snap your fingers and raise it to 20. I wish I could take it to 25. What you have to do is negotiate with SEIU, who is our local union, who agreed with the terms. It's a 3-year term. They weren't going to get paid $18 an hour for another year and a half. We bumped that up to $18 an hour. Can it go more? Yes. And I hope that in the next contract we agree to that because our employees deserve way more than they're getting paid right now because they do a lot of great work for this county and this region. In order to make changes, which is what we've done, we have been out in the streets talking about what the issues actually are, not sitting behind the desk. What I have done on Pittsburgh City Council, fighting for higher wages, fighting for paid sick leave, fighting for a housing opportunity fund that's going to impact residents throughout this city and this region. Those are some of the things that the controller's office can do. We can put out recommendations like we did with an environmental plan, like we're doing at the jail with incarcerees and their families. Those are the types of things that our office has already done. And when we have the longer conversation about homelessness and housing, we are already in that process to help fight people who have been inequitably challenged by this whole conversation. So that is something that our office is already doing because I understand those issues. I represented the most diverse neighborhoods in the city of Pittsburgh. And that's something that I take with me to this office to understand what each and every individual is seeing. And what we're not doing around this county and even in the city is telling people what opportunities are out there. And that's frustrating. We need to educate our residents on the opportunities that they have to succeed. And that's something that I did in Hazelwood and I continue to do in this office.
Thank you. I'm going to hop around here because we're running out of time. So we're only going to ask a few more questions. The environment is obviously a huge issue that we talk about generally. Recently, East Palestine in Ohio has come up at the forefront. It's just shown the importance of regulation and, labeling items correctly and instances where there's going to be interaction with the public. As controller, how do you see the position, you know, like what is the position's role, you know, in addressing environmental issues and, you know, environmental health issues? Who went first last time? Was it Cory? Darwin, sorry. Okay. Yeah, Cory.
Yeah, so environmental issues, I mean, that has caused a number of issues in number of counties and a number of boroughs throughout the county. When you talk about the railroad lines, we took them on in the city of Pittsburgh. We fought double-decker trains going through our city. We were lucky a couple of years ago that when that train collapsed on Station Square, there was only like baby food in it. But those are some things that we continue to fight, and we have to fight them. We can cut out permits. We can fight them on a higher level. I'm glad Congress is finally having that conversation because the railroads have controlled our city and our region for way, way too long. When it comes to the environment, it's something that affects each and every one of us. So the Clean Air Fund being audited, internal audits of the county and what we're putting forward. But the one thing we haven't talked about is development. When you do a development in this county, you should have sustainable standards in that development. In the city of Pittsburgh, we held people accountable for what they were doing. If they wanted to build an extra story on one of their buildings, they had to have an environmental plan with that. That's something that we are in the process of auditing as well. The Economic Development Department in the county, that if you're gonna get our tax money to build your project, you better bring something back for our neighbors and our residents. And when I was on the Alcoasam board, we had 0 green infrastructure dollars. When I left, we were over $100 million in green sustainable infrastructure. That not only beautifies our communities by having green infrastructure, it creates a new wave of jobs that can help a lot of people rebuild their own lives by having those green sustainable jobs.
Thank you. Darwin?
Yeah, so I think when we approach environmental racism, there's a lot of different places to attack it. It can be as large as air quality enforcement in the health department, but then also as small as trees in Black neighborhoods, where we know that Black neighborhoods are on average 7 degrees hotter than the white neighborhoods because they don't have as many shade trees and they don't have as much greenery to help clean the air. So I think starting with the health department, we need to address not just the Clean Air Fund where fines are after pollution, but proactively looking at how do we discourage pollution, and in particular, it's the air quality enforcement program. We need to audit and reform the calculations so that they're more detailed in how they take into the impact of healthcare impacts. And I think we need to look at I think it's Article 21, Title 21, where they talk about the different mechanisms that we have to combat air pollution and make sure that the fines are much higher. And once we're maxed out in the fines, then we need to start talking about temporarily shutting these places down because we can't let them keep poisoning our communities. I mean, we're talking about lung cancer, we're talking about asthma. As a teenager, I had part of my left lung removed due to lung collapses, and research since then has linked lung collapses to air pollution. And so, it's a personal issue for me. I don't have 2 full lungs. So when we talk about air quality days, that impacts me more than other folks. So it's something that is going to be on my mind constantly about how we can make sure that we have clean air in our region for everyone. And I think that's also a big part of attracting folks to our region. I think people have come here and they've developed coughing issues and then move away, and those coughing issues go away. So I think people have seen and viewed Pittsburgh as an area where local government hasn't taken on quality of life and air quality aggressively, and that's something that we need to focus on for all residents. I'm proud to be supported by Food and Water Action for this work, and the other piece of it is also leases, in particular the Deer Lakes fracking lease. We're pretty sure that they're violating it. The people go out to the parks, they can smell it, they can see it, they know that they're violating their leases and that they're not meeting standards. It's within the controller's purview to audit that lease, to inspect all the books, to look at production records, to see if they are overproducing, if they're producing unsafely. That's something that needs to happen as quickly as possible because the whole idea of fracking in Deer Lakes was that it wasn't going to impact the park, but it has. And I think those broken promises we see time and time again with fossil fuels. Fossil fuel companies that have donated to the other campaign. I think that's something that we need to address aggressively, and we need somebody who refuses fossil fuel contributions like myself if we really want to tackle those issues so that there's not a conflict of interest like there has been with all the other campaign contributions that have been poured into this race.
Cory, you were mentioned directly, 30 seconds to respond.
Yes, I mean, obviously, we know that the environment is an issue, and we've taken it seriously. When I was on city council, we banned fracking in the city of Pittsburgh. I supported that. It was passed before I got there, but we upheld the court the court possible challenge, and we continue to fight that. When it comes to, again, PAC money, I'd still like to see this giant PAC that I got from UPMC. I haven't seen it. I know that employees who are doctors that are friends of mine that have donated, that's something different. But when you talk about taking on the environmental issues that we have, banning fracking in our parks, being sustainable through our future developments in the county, auditing the Clean Air Fund, which has never been audited before, those are things we are already working on, and we will continue to fight for that, because that's what the controller needs to do, is fight for this region, fight for good quality air control, because we know it doesn't happen. When I was on city council, we saw the amount of bad air that was coming into my district. And those polluters need to be held accountable. They need to be shut down if they are not doing that. But that money also needs to go back into things that are going to help our environment and our community. And right now it's not doing that because nobody's audited it. And I'm calling for that audit.
Thank you.
Thank you. While we're on the topic of environment and location, we'd like to bring up transportation access. Transportation access is an ongoing conversation. How do you see the Office of the Controller contributing to make public transport more accessible than it is right now? Darwin.
Yes, this is a great question that I love because I don't own a car, and I've got my bus pass right here in my pocket that I carry with me because I rely on our buses and our T system to get around, unlike a lot of other elected officials. So, I think again, this comes back to trust. You can trust that I'm going to focus on public transit because I rely on public transit as someone who doesn't own a car. And I think we need to understand that, transit policy is housing policy, is environmental policy, right? So we need to support transit-oriented development. We need to, push for the end of exclusionary zoning near traffic centers so that we can build more housing along transit lines so that people can get to where they go, so that we become less car dependent. And when we think about the changing region and how we used to have a much stronger streetcar system, but then a lot of those lines have been paved over, and that's heartbreaking to me because when we think about that, we know that relates to white flight and suburban white flight in particular. When we think about transit issues in the controller's office, I talked a bit about how it's unfortunate that we can't directly audit the Port Authority, but I know that Kathleen D-Incumbent is doing a very good job on trying to tackle these issues, and I would like to work with both Pittsburghers for Public Transit, of which I'm a member, and the Pittsburgh Regional Transit System to find ways. Specifically, most recently we talked about the low fares program, and I was talking to the director there about that because we know that we have surplus money in the county budget, and there's funding available to increase access for low-income riders. And I think that is one of the greatest impacts that we could have in the controller's office is to find that money so that we can support expanding that program and make sure that people have transit access. While on the other side, trying to increase the amount of funding that we have for public transit in the region.
Thank you.
So when you talk about transit, it has to be smart transit. What I did when I was on city council, I ended the Mon-Oakland connector. We defunded that project because it was a road from CMU directly to Hazelwood Green. No reason for that. You know what I did with that money? I put it back into affordable housing. I was the only one on city council during the pandemic to transfer multi-million dollars into affordable housing. If you want to talk about transit-oriented development, look at what we did in Squirrel Hill. Squirrel Hill had no affordable housing. We built 2 giant buildings right on the corner of Forward and Murray for affordable housing. You have to spread affordable housing all across the city of Pittsburgh, and you can do it with transit. And what we're talking about, the BRT, was never supportive of the BRT. If it happens, as the controller, you have to make sure that contracts are fulfilled throughout that, but that we're also doing it in smart, effective ways. From downtown to Oakland is a huge connection, but you have to get out to the Mon Valley. I go out there all the time for meetings in McKeesport. You have to ensure that those residents have the ability to get to those needed jobs downtown and in other areas. Right now, we are not doing that. We are not setting up a good transit system. And when we do that development, it has to have equity involved in it. Because if you just do a line from Oakland to downtown, which is what everybody's calling for, you're helping Pitt students and people downtown. you're not helping the entire region. And that's how you have to look at a whole transit-oriented center and whether that money is going to the proper organizations or not.
Thank you so much. This is our last question before we move to a brief Q&A with the audience. What about Allegheny County brings you joy, and why does that make you want to push it forward?
So there's a lot of things. I got this question the other day. What's something unique that you didn't know about Allegheny County? And I think our park system is something that is very unique to us. We've actually started to look into connecting our parks together, making them regional assets. You're not going to connect them all at once because you have highways and a number of factors. But what we were doing in the city was we were connecting various parts together. And you have to build regional access so that everybody can enjoy our parks. The other thing people don't know about Allegheny County, which is something I found out, was that we actually have buffalo in Allegheny County. Yeah, South Park has buffalo. I know it's neat, it's different, but those are some things that are great. And actually the number one thing growing up here, the people of this region are great. And we do not show how great we are too often, because you have people here that are willing to fight for good causes. And whenever I go out and talk to people in the streets, they want to help make change in this county. And I think that's something that's important. We, on the other hand, as elected officials, have to empower those individuals, give them a seat at the table. That's why, we have taken on issues that a lot of people have never talked about in the county controller's office, because we are listening to the people of this region. And that's something that's very important to me.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. It's the people, but also, we were just talking about transit, and I think the new buses with the skylights are phenomenal. And also, taking the T going south, especially after a snowy day and seeing all the snow-covered trees. Some of the most beautiful sights in Pittsburgh, whether it's going through the Forked Tunnel and seeing the city view, are largely based in our transit systems and our bus systems, and that's something that I want to increase access to. So I would say the new transit systems and how the beauty of Allegheny County, and then also the people.
Thank you both so much. So thank you so much to both of our candidates who came out today. We're going to give them a round of applause. So for the next 10 to 15 minutes, we are going to do some audience question and answer. So the best way to do this is we have a small enough group. I think we just call them out. So anybody who was sitting there observing questions that we didn't ask, questions that you have, let's go ahead and get started. Tanisha?
Okay. So one of the areas that I think the county controller can be most effective at is with their role in the jail oversight board. And one of my questions, and this is born out of frustrations that people who watch the meetings have, is that the board is not as effective as it can be, especially when it comes to contract enforcement and transparency. So with your position on the jail oversight board, what changes could you realistically make to A, make the board more effective at holding the jail accountable to the contracts that they've made, and B, increasing the transparency around the process when the jail enters into contracts like requests for proposals, who's bidding on the job, and so on.
Sorry. Darwin versus Cory.
Okay.
Absolutely. So I talked a lot about the contract enforcement that I believe can happen today if we really wanted it to. We don't need to wait until contracts expire and end, and we've already given them all the money to try to claw some of it back. Because as I mentioned, we had some of these same problems with Trinity. Actually, my right to know law requests proved that Trinity wasn't keeping the records that they were required by law to keep. But now that we've paid them all of that money, there seems to be no incentive to go after it, and it's also a lot harder to do that once it's been done. So I would say contract enforcement has to happen in real time. When it comes to transparency, that's something where, because you're the controller, you have the statutory authority to inspect and audit anywhere that money touches. And you can make that stuff public as controller. You have the authority to fulfill, right to know law requests and to provide a lot of the information that the jail isn't handing out. You could be in there every day taking pictures of the food, or not necessarily pictures per se, but documenting the food. You could structure an audit of heating and water by putting sensors in the jail to detect when the heating goes out or when they don't have hot water. So there's a lot of different creative ways that we can use the statutory authority of the Controller's Office to see what's happening in the jail in real time, as opposed to waiting for incarcerated folks to send a letter to their loved one who then gives it to Bethany. Because that takes several days and we don't hear about it until Bethany hears about it. But the controller has the total authority to make all of this public in real time, and that's something that I would do if I were controller, because having been on having been going to jail oversight board meetings for many, I share the exact same frustrations you share, and I've been publicly commenting about these frustrations at the jail oversight board meetings. So we know the problems, we know the solutions. It's just a matter of implementation.
Yes, as you know, we do the transparency because we post everything that goes on at our jail board meetings. And we've made multiple motions that a lot of those reports that were not going to be public, we made the motion in those meetings to put them out to the public. So transparency is something I've always taken seriously throughout my career. You talk about jail oversight and going on tours. I did 2 surprise inspections. Most jail board members that do their visits are not posting. We posted. We've told the story that I saw with my own very 2 eyes of what was going on in the jail and how it needed to change. As you know, we're talking about motions to get information to loved ones whose resident at the jail is injured, or unfortunately the deaths that we've had. Be more transparent with people so that they get that information faster. We do have those motions that we've been working on to get that information out to loved ones whose person is in the jail, and I think that's a huge issue that we have to take on. When you talk about hiring a liaison that can be our constant eyes and ears, fighting back the jail, giving us proper information for what they see daily, that is going to help change the conversation of what reshaping the jail is. As we know, that organization's coming to do their review, and we're going to get that review any day now. But what we actually have to do is look at the criminal justice system together. Everybody talks about shrinking the jail. It should, half the people in there shouldn't even be in there. And we've had that conversation as well. And I think those are the really good conversations that I'm willing to have. I've already had them. And I will continue to go on surprise inspections because I want to see what those residents are dealing with on a daily basis. When I went on the last tour, people were not getting coats till the end of November. Brought that up at the jail board meeting and in my report, and people got coats faster. So it's being there is one thing, but pushing for change as a board member goes a very long way in having those long-term conversations of fixing the actual problems and being respectful to residents at the jail, which we have not seen from this administration.
Thank you. Please.
I just want to ask both candidates, do you support campaign finance reform at the county level? And what specific measures would you support at the county level? And how do you practice ethical donations for your campaign right now? 100%.
I voted, well, actually, I don't think I was on council at the time, but I supported that when I was on Pittsburgh City Council. And I think it has to come into play at the county level. And I know Councilmember Dewar, I believe, put out legislation for that already. But yes, campaign finance reform, as well as limits on campaign donations, is definitely needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the way you run a campaign shows what your values are. And so, that's why I keep going back to corporate PAC donations and, $10,000 contributions from the guy who chairs UPMC East and UPMC Keys Board, who used to be the VP of UPMC Community Relations. Because, that person who donated $10,000 is, would be directly impacted, UPMC East and UPMC Keys Board, would be directly impacted by a countywide parcel review. And that's the thing that I've been talking about again and again and again. So, once again, I think when you look at campaign contributions where I don't take money from fossil fuel companies or corporate PACs, I think you really have to demonstrate that now instead of, waiting for a change to happen at the county level. I think it's very much about trust, because if you're in the county controller's office, you have to have the trust of the community and of the people of Allegheny County that your audits are not politically motivated. The other thing about that person who gave $10,000 is he's at Visit Monroeville. So we're doing this big audit of Visit Pittsburgh, but there's a question about the ethics of that when you receive so much money from the person who is at Visit Monroeville, right? So, I think it doesn't necessarily mean that there is anything nefarious going on, but I think it calls into question a lot of the work that you're doing, and you can't have that if you're the controller. You have to be completely ethical. You have to make sure that folks don't have any reason to question what you're doing, because if you're the last line of defense, then you need to make sure that you're robust and that people feel that you yourself are practicing the values that we need.
I want to be fair, so since you were mentioned directly, Cory, if you want to respond to that, 30 seconds.
Yes, I believe he's talking about Senator Sean Logan, who was a PA senator for a number of years. He does run the Chamber of Commerce in Monroeville. He does have a seat on one of UPMC's boards, but going back to what I've already said about how you fight UPMC, doesn't matter who gives me money. And probably the number one reason that he gives me money is because I'm his son's golf coach. And I've known the guy for 25 years. So if you want to talk about relationships, that's building relationships. And you know what? For somebody to give me money and me out publicly saying UPMC is not a nonprofit and we should fight them shows that I'm not scared of anybody that gives me $1, because I've always proven to fight back against corporate greed and corporate corruption. And if you stand outside with SEIU and their healthcare workers and fight for them to get a union, that is immediately going to impact everybody at UPMC, and it's going to give workers a right to fair elections so that they can get higher wages. So if that's what we're talking about, I'm glad that I have a friend, okay? Does he work for the Chamber of Commerce in Monroeville? Yes, he does.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
It was that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I couldn't see.
I'm like, all right, great.
No, yeah.
Yeah, because mine's is real quick. It's not it. All right, so I was just listening, taking notes. And this is just for, when you guys do your campaigning, your canvassing, when you go into like communities, I would just suggest, and you don't have to, that's where there's a lot of liaisons, community, people like me who can simplify some of this stuff, because a lot of people just don't vote because they feel like it's over their head. So I'm just trying to take notes. So when I go and I promote us to vote, you can understand it. So when you're talking about like these contracts with DHS and Clean Air Fund, where would someone look in the budget to see like how these are in the budget? Is that the capital budget? Is that under capital budget? Okay. And then you had mentioned something about incarcerated kids. Is there already a contract where the kids of incarcerated inmates should be getting some type of services? Because if so, I've never heard about it. So is there already something in place for that?
I assume that's directed at me. Okay. Okay, so no, so that's why we did the audit. So what we found out, there's Mercy Behavioral as well as Amachi that are outside organizations that help with kids of caregivers who are at the jail. But last year alone, 12,000 kids were affected by a parent, guardian, or as I said, caregiver who spent a day in the county jail. And what happens is a lot of those programs do not provide support until after 2 months. That has to change. What we've already started doing in our process is we've worked with the jail and administration on posting posters throughout the jail so that people know who to call for that support. We've done the audit on DHS to say, why does that funding not help immediately? I've also went out to the Pittsburgh Food Bank in order to get residents at the jail and their family food while they're spending time there. So that's the longer conversation, that we are letting our kids down, and that is not fair. I mean, 12,000 alone last year, and 2/3 of those kids were under the age of 12. So, you are not providing enough support and assistance. That's why we wanted to look into that immediately when we got there, and the report just came out yesterday.
But is there something that shows how much Mercy and Amachi got, like where the public can see?
Yes, so that would not be within county budget. The Mercy or Amachi, I believe, got $150,000, but they are a separate outside agency. So Amachi Pittsburgh is right on 5th Avenue downtown, And they are starting a new program with mentorship with residents at the county jail as well and talking to their kids. So that's a long-term conversation, but we were the ones to bring it to everybody's attention because it's something that impacts us each and every day, and nobody ever had that conversation.
Darwin, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about these issues, it's not just about, social services for, the children of incarcerated folks in the jail. I think we need to talk about, CYF in general. I think we're down, I believe, 100 caseworkers, if I recall correctly. And, that's in large part due to, low salaries and a lack of recruitment in the Department of Human Services. So I think it's important to realize that when we look at a lack of social services, a lack of background services, this is a major countywide issue that has disparate racial impacts, everywhere across the board.
Thank you. Oh, over there.
I just have a question for Darwin. So you've spoken about your audits on UPMC, but I'd like you to talk a little bit more about serving as an auditor for O'Hara and any audits you've completed your time there, since you've been doing that for over 5 years now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Maddie. It's great to see you again. I see you at all the events, working for Cory over here. And yeah, so as I mentioned before, O'Hara's auditor position is pretty nominal. So a lot of the auditing work that I've done has been looking at the county's impact on, our residents and on the county as a whole. So that's why I've been doing, right to know law requests to expose when, for example, the Trinity contract, when they weren't fulfilling that contract, when, there's not compliance in the jail, when, we know that air quality spending is not going back to the impacted communities. So, I take this holistically, and I look at how the county as a whole impacts municipalities, because, on the campaign trail, as I talk to a lot of other smaller municipal governments and mayors and council folks, they're all telling me about the different pieces that impact them. And I think a lot of them resent Pittsburgh in some sense, because a lot of the discussion that we have is about Pittsburgh, rightfully so, because Pittsburgh is, the largest municipality. But our smaller municipalities are really struggling. And I think one of the pieces that would be most helpful is looking at consolidation of services locally, and also having the county take over policing. That's something that happened in Wilmerding, where Wilmerding got, in my opinion, it was a pretty sweetheart deal for 5 years of the county police taking over, and we saw crime go down. And we also know that the county police is going to have better training and better oversight. So when we look at municipal level work, I've done that work at the municipal level. I've talked to other boroughs, I've worked with other boroughs, and because I am not from the city and because I'm from the suburbs, I have a better understanding of what it is that our smaller municipalities like O'Hara Township need from the county.
Sort of conversely, Cory, can you talk just a little bit about your work in the city and just sort of the differences between that and the suburbs? I'll give you a chance.
Yeah, I mean, the city is the heart and soul of this county. And knowing what happens in the city really helps us at the county level see what's going on, where you need to spend money, how you're talking about equity and diversity. And when, I represented the Hazelwood area, we did not want people in Hazelwood, when this new development comes in, to be gentrified out. So what we did was we put caps on housing. We put a rental assistance arrangement in down there. So what we were able to do in the city with city-owned land was keep it equitable. And that's what you have to do. And when you talk about policing, when I was public safety chair, I called for a de-escalation of police when you go to actual basic calls. What does that mean? If I'm called to a domestic, you don't need SWAT teams there. You need actual support. You need DHS agents to come in and help. And we pushed for that, and I wrote a letter publicly to the mayor saying, if we want to reshape policing and efforts across the county, at that time it was the city, you have to be able to reshape and rethink what you're going to do with that. And as public safety chair, we did that. We have to have those conversations, because a 911 call doesn't mean a police officer needs to show up. And I think that's the trust that people can have in me in this county, because I understand those issues that you see on a daily basis, because I operated the city of Pittsburgh as a council member for 11 years.
Darwin? Awesome. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our time. Thank you both to Cory and Darwin for being here today and engaging with us. Thank you to our audience who showed up today. Another round of applause for y'all for sure. We'll be back next week for the city controller discussion. So it'll be on Wednesday, time to be determined, but please keep up with us on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for being in this forum with us. We'll see you next week.
As a reminder, May 16th, 2023 is the municipal primary. The last day to request a mail-in or absentee ballot, May 9th, 2023, and the last day to register to vote, May 1st. We want to thank our candidates for joining us this afternoon, and for those of you who tuned in, we thank you so much as well. For One Hood Power, I'm Jenny Lewis. Thank you for coming. Please get home safe. Good night.
The best I've been coaching.